Hello, everyone. This is Matt, as always, broadcasting from the Path of Progress for Cubic Dimensions, coming to you every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And here tonight with me, I have a special guest, my friend Aiden.
How are you, everybody? Pleasure to be here. Thank you to Matt for the invite. But yeah, really excited to start some good conversations. So let's get it.
So indeed, it has been a big week in American politics and news. Uh, Firstly, with the inauguration of the 45th President, Donald Trump, and the subsequent Women's March of Saturday. Well, I should say marches. There was a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Only one inauguration party, though, but that's because there's only one place to have an inauguration, so that kind of makes sense. Anyway, still on topic, whatever. But yeah, so the greatest part about all of this fun, festive events is that shortly after inauguration, I believe it was yesterday, Sean Spicer, the new White House communications director and press secretary, claimed that Donald Trump's inauguration was the most well-attended inauguration of recorded history, and the women's marches attendance paled in comparison. And another thing about inauguration is that the new president's inaugural speech, was actually, I guess you could say, a lot more reasonable, a lot more unifying than previous speeches of his, but that's besides the point. So obviously, a bunch of fact checkers jumped on this because it's the world of politics. That's what they do. And of course, as can be the case in modern politics, Sean Spicer was completely not telling the truth at all. While the new president's inauguration was well attended, of course, as most are, the Women's March in D.C., as well as the marches across the world, mainly in major U.S. cities, were actually attended by a lot more people. So, and of course, the best part of the story is that Kellyanne Conway, former Trump campaign manager and now counselor to the president, claimed on, I believe it was CNN, that the press secretary used alternative facts to explain the situation.
Yikes.
Which is a term I've never heard before.
Yep, me neither, man.
Interesting take on it. So let's first things first. Of course, his team is coming out and saying this. They have to spin it well for him. Like that's just a given. And when it comes to situations like this, it really is hard to spin it in a good light. And particularly, it appears with now President Trump that he seems to really enjoy ratings, let's say, to put it simply, popularity. And obviously, that seems to have waned a bit in the months since he was elected president. So, real quick, Aiden, I'm curious as to your take on this.
Wow, it is a lot of information, and I was like kind of almost like struggling to keep up with all of it because, like, you know, I'm not particularly surprised. I'm not particularly shocked, but I am also at the same time like not surprised. Mainly because this is exactly the kind of thing, at least from my perspective, that I was expecting. Because when you run a whole campaign throughout, say, the course of a year and a half, I'm assuming that's how long the election went. I mean, like you do end up saying some lies, but when you're Donald J. Trump, you're the cream of the crop when it comes to telling flat out lies and making up things that aren't quite exactly what you would call factually accurate. And I think what was really alarming was Sean Spicer's whole attempt to spin that. Not because, like, oh, hey, like, it is politics, that should be expected that politicians, do tell flat out lies. But I think the reason why it's particularly alarming is, in the context of the current fear that people have that, Donald J. Trump is not going to be a president that protects the civil liberties of all Americans. And, knock on wood, let's hope that is the case, that he does. But when you start lying to people, your people start lying to the American people almost immediately as you get into office. Granted, our constitutional right is to, speak out and criticize. And, I'm almost kind of bothered by the fact that, there's people out there who are saying, like, hey, like, let's not criticize the president. Let's give him a chance, which is, again, like, I'm not saying we shouldn't, give him a chance or whatever that may exactly mean. It's a very loose definition. But that does not mean, we cannot exercise the constitutional rights to freedom of speech. And, I'm going to admit, like, I do respect Kellyanne Conway to an extent, from a professional standpoint. She, along with Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, they really saved that his campaign from really just like, hitting rock bottom. And they probably made one of the greatest comebacks in political history. But the issue here I have here is that, they're really betraying, a very fundamental and really radical idea in politics, which is that, hey, like, there are facts, and I mean that completely sarcastically, because, facts and, especially scientific facts, which, aren't going to be disputed until, scientists, dispute them unanimously. Granted, like, some things are open to debate until we have a universal consensus. But the reason why, like, I think people should be alarmed about this is because there is no such thing as alternative facts. I feel like, I think that's really, stretching it right there, Kellyanne. I mean, like, all due respect, you did break a glass ceiling. You're the first campaign manager in American history who was a woman who ran a successful presidential campaign, and that's incredible. But the issue I have with that is really just that just sounds like lying with extra steps. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, something smells a little bit fishy here. And, we're not in Sandwich, and we're definitely not in any part of the state, where there's, harbors or fishing nearby. We're just, two regular guys. And I think you, Matt, I feel like you probably can see that there's an issue with this, ethically, but also just like, hey, like, this is just fitting this whole, like, fake news phenomenon. And I don't know, it's a slippery slope in my opinion. I think it's going to lead to not so nice things. I don't want to see more fake news on both sides of the aisle, but I don't know, like, that makes sense, right? I feel like that's kind of like where I'm at with this whole thing right now, from a very non-surprise standpoint. But nonetheless, what's your take on it? I feel like you also probably have a nice, refreshing take on it as well. But yeah, man, hit me.
Well, yeah, this is why the media is important, is to, like, politicians lie, stretch the truth all the time. It's not like Donald Trump, as you said, it's not like Donald Trump and his team are the first people to do that in American politics or in politics in general. But that means it's really Donald Trump has played a clever game because he has convinced mainly people who support him, but even some people who oppose him in certain instances end up agreeing with him on this. He was able to convince people that conventional news outlets lie. They do sometimes, like, they do mislead, and they do there is bad journalism out there, but for the most part, they wouldn't be so successful if they didn't do a good job.
Yeah, exactly.
And although that might be a fallacy, but besides the point. And so he's been able to manipulate the situation so well that anytime the media criticizes him or points out something that he said is false or misleading or whatever, or his team has, he immediately jumps on it and says, "Oh no, that's fake news. That's propaganda. That's not true.
It's wrong.
That's wrong." And then and it's like, okay, well then everybody who supports him is like, "Oh yeah, that's true. Like he's right." And they're like, "Well, no, there are certain instances where that's not true."
No, I know. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, like, are we gonna fall? Are we gonna fall under the spell of this, cult of Trump? Are we gonna really, speak the truth here and say, like, hey, like there are objective facts, there are objective realities about this world. I mean, whether we like it or not. Like, if you smoke cigarettes, you're gonna get cancer. If we keep using fossil fuels, we're probably gonna get screwed in regards to climate change. And I don't know what else to. I really don't know what else to say because, like, like this is like something straight out of the book of authoritarianism. And I feel like in a lot of ways, that should alarm people. But at the same time, some people, I would feel like, not a great majority, but like, some people do want, that kind of leadership, and that's something, that maybe not be too mainstream, but I think we don't want that to become mainstream because what happened at the National Women's March was, I think, the direction that we need to go into because that's exactly like, what not only Donald Trump, but my man Bernie Sanders tapped into, with populism and, that at the end of the day, grassroots organization, that goes across, religious boundaries and ethnic boundaries and, you name it, all boundaries, whether it's sexual orientation or party politics. I feel like that's exactly the kind of America that I want to live in. I don't want to live in America where, like, hey, there's a black person next door, like, we should be afraid, because that's not really, I want to raise my children, and I don't think the majority of people today really believe that's how they want to live their children to live. Or I guess what I'm trying to say is that that's not how the majority of people, I would feel, at least on an explicit consensus, want their children to, what kind of country they want their children to live in. Because, I just feel, and hear me out on this. Like, I feel like, all this hates, this toxic, speech and, politics, I'm not saying just like, oh, hey, like, let's criticize and like try to, let's try to expose each other, each other's flaws. I think that's obviously, part of, the healthy way to win an election. But like, when you start, relying on fake news agencies and quite literally like falsities to, to defeat your opponent, I feel like that sets a really bad precedent, especially when, the majority of people believe that America is exceptional. And to claim that, like, hey, like, let's not tell the truth about the Women's March and the inauguration. It obviously doesn't do justice to the Women's March, but it really doesn't do justice to the country as a whole, because I don't know, do they think we're stupid? Like, I don't think we don't pay attention. Republican, Democrat, Independent, I feel like people know how to pay attention to the news. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of the times, and the reason why people get so frustrated with politicians, I think, is because when they say things like the claim that Sean Spicer made and, other things close to that, they feel very insulted because they're like, this is an insult to my intelligence. Like, of course I know what you're saying is wrong or misleading, because I can read, I can facts myself and find out that you're not telling the truth. So
yeah.
and that's the disappointing thing, is that Donald Trump was elected on the idea of draining the swamp and of not doing politics as usual. And as you said, similar thing with Bernie Sanders. And of course, there are still some political conventions that you have to follow no matter what. But he doesn't seem to have, the only one that he seems to really be dismissing is the whole be careful with your words thing. Like, that's the only convention he seems to be dismissing, and then everything else seems to be saying the same. And I think that'll cause a lot of the people who supported him to be very disappointed in him. I know it disappointed me, because at the end of the day, he was elected. He's the president. He's the leader for at least the next 4 years. So we have to hope for him to at least do a modest job so nothing gets screwed up too bad, and the same case with everybody else. And, but that's the thing, is that he's not, at the same time, he's not a typical president. And this is actually an article that I read that I can't find right. I want to say I put it in this document, but I can't find it. Oh yeah, here. I found it. It was by The Guardian. It's called "Donald Trump is not a normal president. Don't treat him like it." And that's very true, because the most telling example of this is that we've had plenty of presidents who have been elected with a plurality of the vote, or didn't even win the popular vote. They just won the electoral. They lost the popular vote. Recent examples of phenomenons like that being George W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Most people voted against both of them in their first election, and for Bill Clinton also in his second election. And yet they won. And they, during their transition and coming into power, they had approval ratings hovering around the 60s, because everybody hopes that a new president will do well, regardless of whether or not they voted for them. And the interesting phenomenon that has happened is that since Election Day, Donald Trump's approval ratings have not gone past, I think, 51%. And I'm pretty sure at this point he's in the negatives right now.
Yeah.
Like he has more disapproval than approval. And that's really, I think, a really interesting phenomenon, because, like I said earlier, in recorded history, that's never happened before.
Yeah.
And yet he's parading around, and his people are parading around as if he has this mandate that doesn't exist. It would be one thing if we had, if most people liked him and liked what he was doing, and approved of it, then you could at least say, okay, this is the will of the people. Yeah. But it isn't. It isn't. Yeah. Even after 2000, most Americans had a positive view of George W. Bush, even though most of them didn't vote for him. That's not the case here, and it's very very concerning to me, because I feel like what he's doing is not representative of what people want. And if there is a united opposition to him throughout his presidency, and especially when he runs for re-election, then he's not going to have a good time.
Yeah, he really isn't. And you're right. I mean, he's not. I wouldn't view him as a healthy, elected president. Not because, oh hey, I just don't like his policies. Like, no, like I'm not like that petty. I mean, like I feel like it goes much deeper than that. I think obviously, his approval ratings, reflect a lot of but what kind of candidate, what kind of person he is. I mean, like granted, this is not to say, I know him personally, but like, it speaks for itself. And I think, the guy, I have friends who voted Trump, and like I get why, because they're tired of the status quo, and he presented really the only concrete change to like what was going on the past 8 years. Even though the past 8 years have not been so bad, they haven't been crazy interesting, because there's been good, solid, positive growth, and there have been some issues that I have had with President Obama's administration. But at the end of the day, I understand the reasoning behind how, hey, we're gonna vote Trump, but like at this point, I feel like the whole like, hey, like let's just like let's pretend everything's okay, And I think most people that are in vulnerable communities don't feel that way. You look at, say, people in the city of Boston who come from a family of immigrants and who happen to have family members who maybe are undocumented. That's an all. Donald Trump's ascendance to power is not really something that would make you comfortable. Nor is it. If you're a young college student and a young woman, who's trying to get your degree, and who's is looking forward to seeing the first I'm not saying that Hillary Clinton was destined to win. I mean, there were a lot of flaws that led to her. And granted, it's also a funky election season, but to have these realities thrusted upon you of like, hey, like we're the most anti-choice administration in perhaps the last 40 years, and oh hey, by the way, like here's this tape of me and Billy Bush talking about just some locker room things. I mean, like it's concerning to people the kind of behavior that President Trump is. Oh my God, it's just still so weird to say President Trump, but he is the president, and like, but this kind of conduct that he's displaying is anything but presidential. And like, sure, like, if you want to be one of those like, oh, you've just been in the condition by the system, the thing. No, that's not that. I think we all have a common sense of decency here, and people, people from all sides of the aisle, they deplore some of the things, or they find some of the things that do absolutely detestable. I was canvassing on Friday with a buddy for Environment Massachusetts, which is the organization that I just got hired for. Woo! But which is pretty cool. But we happened to stumble upon a house after several rejections, and this very kind woman, she had a discussion with us. She was a Republican, and the reason why she didn't vote Trump, even though she's a Republican, is because of his conduct, but also because of the environment and these issues that are really non-negotiable for a lot of people, because, it's great to be selfish, but like, in 40 years, if we're indulging in the same behaviors that have gotten us where we are right now, on any level, I don't think it's going to boil over well. I mean, like people feel like we're sitting on like a time bomb politically, and it's scary. I mean, like, and to an extent, I'm not like especially afraid, but like, I think people have a right to be concerned and to voice their concerns in a way that's productive and not destructive. I think, going to, another article that you posted, the protests in DC, I mean, like, I understand. I think most people understand the anger they have right now against the system and against, like, the political establishment for, allowing Donald Trump to win, and honestly, against other Americans for voting him in. But I think to go and burn down and lose stores. Not that again, not that that hasn't been a common thing throughout our history. Go down and loot stores and burn cars, and I feel like it's almost like showing the people who are hateful, or who not even explicitly hateful, but the people that you view as obstacles to your own personal freedoms. That's almost in a sense allowing them to win and to overpower you with you name it. I feel like there's a much more productive ways to change policy than the burn shit. And I think you get it.
Yeah,
I mean, but
I don't get it. Like I know protests in like that in France are very common, and I mean that's French culture, and they can go ahead and do it. But because that's an example that's been brought up to me. But I just don't see the point. And I'm pretty sure what you're referencing, of course, is on Inauguration Day. A few businesses, notably at Bank of America, was the windows were smashed in Washington, D.C. And I don't see how that, like you said, I don't see how that changes any policy, that changes minds at all.
No, if anything, it reinforces, the narrative. Oh, hey, look at these liberals, they're anarchists. Or, oh, look at these blacks and Latinos, they're criminals. And, this is just like the common cycle of viciousness that, people have been succumbed to. And, I mean, obviously, it's not entirely, obviously, if you look at American history, it's not, just out of nowhere that this is happening. I think people are sick and tired of being abused over and over again by the system. Particularly, African Americans and Latinos. I mean, and the poor. I think they get that. Hey, this system is not working for us. We need to be represented properly. And they feel, was it Michelle Alexander? I'm reading a book by her right now. It's called The New Jim Crow, and it's about how mass incarceration is essentially the new Jim Crow. I highly recommend it. I don't know if any of your professors have read it, but it's such a great book in the sense that it really describes on how the system that we have in place right now, it really excludes a lot of African American men who, enter the criminal justice system and are labeled as felons. And that they don't just leave the criminal justice system, because it's really impossible to in the current, criminal justice system we have. I feel like the way it's depicted is that you leave the criminal justice system and you're barred from getting things such as food stamps or getting, basic, entry-level jobs because of that felon status that you have. And, you're outcasted from society. This is creating almost like a undercased in society that we've really never seen before. And I think that just creates problems. And I think people are going to rightfully get angry about that. And, this is almost anything, in my eyes, some foreshadowing of what could be, a presidential term, filled with, a brand, not a brand new, but like, I think a spike in rioting and hopefully, God forbid, hopefully not, I really hope it doesn't lead to mob violence, because, I think it just doesn't make any sense on a policy level. Like, at the same time, like, can you blame people who are left out from society and who are so excluded from society economically and socially to act out in that way? And I think, just label people criminals and then lock them up in cages for another 15 years is not going to solve the problem. And, cutting people's food stamps because they're not able to get a job, that's also counterintuitive. I think that's kind of like the possible positives of this, this recent election. And, Mr. Trump is just so happens to be against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think he's really trying to, in his own twisted way, to follow through with, his commitment to the people, the working class. And, hopefully that some of those good things will come out. But, worst case scenario, we get more of the same and people are just going to get angry. And I think we can't accept any suppression of that anger, granted, as long as it's productive and civil, that's just my view. I think people are entitled to disagree, but that's the whole point of free speech. You can't tell people, oh, because I despise your view, that you can't have that view and speak about it. That's the reason why the Constitution exists, is to protect the rights of those who we may find so, deplorable or nasty, as long as, it's not within the grounds of hate speech. But I might have gone on a big tangent there, but that's what I'm feeling right now. I feel like there's so many things to think about, and so little time to really organize and address them. But does that make sense at all?
Well, no, it's definitely a good point. And to your, because this is a turbulent time and kind of untested waters for us. To the point of, since we're kind of going on this this thought train of protest, violent versus peaceful and whatnot, I was really encouraged by the Women's March, because all that I've seen, there haven't been any recorded arrests of anybody during those. So I think that's a good sign. When it came to the violence in DC during Inauguration Day, the thing I most notably took away from that was the guys running around with the anarchist flags, which I have no idea. I saw the same thing at Women's March too. Like a few people with these flags and like a few like communist flags, and I'm like, why do you guys always carry around flags? Like I don't know. But maybe it's for visibility, but I don't know. Point is that like those guys seem to be few and far between, which is good. And I'm really encouraged by the Women's March, because it's a civil demonstration of peaceful people who just want to make their voices heard and oppose policies themselves, which I think is a much welcomed change from the last few years of, oh, well, we'll just vote for Democrats and then they'll do it.
Yeah,
I think as we've learned, that hasn't happened.
No, absolutely not. I think that obviously there's so many other things that come along with that. With the whole, hey, do we need more political parties and more political parties that aren't, funded by big money? But I think the big thing there, I like what you said, was that, where do these people come from? I think, I bumped into a couple people on campus. There's actually a professor on my campus. He's a huge communist. Nothing against that. I mean, like, it's your view. It's your constitutional right to believe that government should be a certain way or not. But he's always organizing like these events, and I'm like, I feel like going far to the left in response to a far right movement. And maybe on the surface is like, oh, that seems like a good idea, but like, oh no, it's not. Like, I mean, we don't want to lose our sense of decency because someone who isn't necessarily the most decent or the most how do I put this? Traditionally, I can't think of the appropriate word, but traditionally meek president in American history. I think to lose that sense of decency because of recent events is obviously a struggle. But I think it's very easy to not lose that sense of decency. I think I can have a conversation, thankfully, with my relatives and my friends who don't share my view. But I think the second that this is a big thing that Sam Harris talks about. Sam Harris is a neuroscientist, and he's also a big, total side note, big proponent of the same. I guess I don't know exactly what it's called. I think it's like the new atheism. But him and Richard Dawkins and a lot of big thinkers are really big proponents of secular humanism and whatnot. But Sam Harris makes a great point in one of his books on. I think it's on terrorism and on his big critiques of religion is, again, it's not exactly, doesn't sound that relevant, but the point he makes that the second that we stop, I'm paraphrasing, but the second we stop having dialogue and stop conversating on how we can fix problems in society, it's the second that really the only other option that will come to their mind is basically rip each other to shreds, and we don't want to lose that decency. I think people are so divided right now that it's becoming almost primal in the sense that hey, if you don't belong to this group, you're in that group, and we don't like that group, so and I think most people have been pretty good, but we don't want to see that slowly drift down that train track to absolutely nowhere where everyone just is mean, and not even mean, that's not even that is quite literally the nightmare scenario. But organizing and being able to do it in a productive and creative way, like we saw at the Women's March. Were you at the Women's March, by the way? I just wanted to.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, so you saw all the signs and I was so impressed by the pussy hats. I thought those were great. They were all little hats, and for those of you who weren't there, they were these little knitted hats. A lot of young women, and even your typical neighborhood grandma would knit, and they had little cat ears, and they were just I adore them. They're so great. But they're also I took the Green Line from Newton with a relative and her daughter, and there were so many people on the Green Line that I had to quite literally press up against the glass. I'm not even exaggerating, just to even get on the train without getting in the way of the doors closing, and that was how many people wanted to go to this and to say, we want to make sure that we can, be part of a movement that changes American history and changes our state and, helps our brothers and sisters who may be in need in these dark days. And I thought that was incredible because that means people still care in a way that is guided by reason and is guided by, basic human values. Hey, let's have a unspoken mutual respect for each other. Even if that means, putting aside our personal beliefs. Or I'm not going to tolerate any kind of hatred towards my friend Joey Biden. I'm just making it. I'm throwing out names, but we can't. Only there's a great saying that I think it's Eleanor Roosevelt said something along the lines of, you might know what I'm thinking about. It's only you can allow yourself to hate a person, but or some, I forget exactly how the saying goes. I'm gonna look it up actually because it's very relevant to this podcast. But while I look for it, feel free to drift off and.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, yeah, you make a great point, and it was definitely an excellent showing. I think so. To your point about getting more divided and more divisive, is and I say this a lot, is that we have to recognize the difference between politicians and voters and individual people, because politicians are going to have all this kind of rhetoric. Whether they're Democrat or Republican, they're going to do all these different things. Just because someone votes for them doesn't necessarily mean they condone every single thing that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find a lot of people have a lot of unique perspective. Pardon me. Unique perspectives on situations. A lot more that are a lot more complex than the smoke and mirrors of politics. For instance, us on the left, we like to label Trump's supporters and voters as racists and sexists and what have you. And of course, that's completely not true. People voted for Donald Trump for a variety of reasons. And just because they voted for him doesn't mean they're any one of those things or that they approve of any one of those things. It just means that they liked something about him more than, and it was able to sell them on it. Now, unfortunately, the scary part is that there are still people out there who are, the baddies. So since we're on this subject, and to tie into the sort of topic of protests, I'm wondering, Aiden, what your perspective on the Richard Spencer case is.
Ooh, I'm glad you brought that up, Matthew. No, listen, I despise the views of Richard Spencer. Do not listen. Let's make that very clear. Now, this is honestly a very see, that's the thing too, is because I only saw the video I think once, and like it was in a context. I think one of my friends shared it, and like it was just for like satiric reasons. I kind of thought about it because like I guess if you applied a lot of what we just applied, Richard Spencer, is inciting, the good old American Nazi Party vision for the future of America. I've actually, just out of curiosity, I'm like, oh, hey, I'm gonna look into following this guy. No, but I've read, I've read into some of the concerns, whether it's through the New York Times or through the websites of these groups. People are concerned that white people are being forgotten. And it's like, oh, great. Like, whoa, like that's like a big deal. Not really in the sense, if you look at it, hey, look at the last 300 years of American history where like white people were in control and completely ruined the lives of Native Americans and enslaved Africans for, oh my God, generations and generations. I think Richard Spencer's views to me are about as appealing as a burnt piece of toast. I feel like, and some people like burnt piece of toast. That's not a very big majority.
Can I just, I'd like to quote really quick before you continue from the New York Times article on this, because it is wonderful. And there are obviously, as Aiden and I are saying to those of you who are viewing, we're advocating to be understanding and be compassionate towards people who don't necessarily agree with you. But this is to sort of support what I think both Aiden and I are getting at. So, quote, Mr. Spencer, who is credited with coining the term alt-right, describes himself as an identitarian, was punched in the head on Inauguration Day by a person clad in black as he was being interviewed by a journalist. At the time of the attack, Mr. Spencer was explaining the meaning of Pepe the Frog, a cartoon figure, aka a meme, adopted as a mascot by the alt-right, a racist far-right fringe movement that is anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, and anti-feminist. Of course, a lot of them oppose that label, but anyway, continuing. Video of the attack shows Mr. Spencer reeling to one side under the force of the blow, and his attacker darting through the crowd after the punch. A bystander who chased the attacker later posted a video on YouTube of his encounter with the man. The assailant can be heard telling a friend that the man filming him filming them is mad, quote, mad because I hit Richard Spencer. Mr. Spencer described the incident as a Periscope video he posted on Twitter on Friday. Shortly after the attack, he said he was spat on by another person. On Saturday, he said he had a black eye. Mr. Spencer's video was recorded from what is described as a safe space. He said that he thought the attack happened in part because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Quote, okay, this is the best part though. There was an actual anti-fascist rally going on, and I walked into it. And he's saying that this is him going to the wrong place at the wrong time. So interesting thing there. Where is it? For the record, Richard Spencer says he is not a Nazi. In an interview on Saturday, he said he was a member of the alt-right, which he calls, quote, identity politics for white Americans and for Europeans around the world. How is that different from Nazism? Richard Spencer says Nazism is a historical term that is not going to resonate today.
Okay.
So digest that for a second. What he's saying is that he doesn't call himself a Nazi because Nazis are from the past. Not because he doesn't identify with the ideology, per se, but because Nazism is a term from the past.
Boy, see, like, again, like, I'm going to be completely real with anyone who's listening or who will listen to this podcast. How can you not want to punch the guy? You know, and this guy is, you know, the most, like, again, like, you know, I'm going to try and pull a Michael Dukakis here because if anyone has watched any documentaries on the Bush versus Dukakis election, what really screwed Michael Dukakis in that election was his response to a question about his wife, which was tied in with the question about abortion. And basically the question was like, hey, like, do you support if Kitty Dukakis were like raped and murdered, would you allow her to get would you say, like, what do you know exactly what I'm referring to? Because I forget exactly what the question was.
It was the question of the last debate, the first question of the last debate, and they said, Governor Dukakis, if Kitty Dukakis, his wife, was raped and murdered, would you want to seek the death penalty?
Oh yeah, it was a death penalty.
Yeah, and he got into this very robotic, very obviously rehearsed response in which he said, well, no, I wouldn't want to do that, and that's because the death penalty is bad, and he went into that instead of saying what everybody expected him to say, which was, of course I'd want the death penalty. Don't let relatives of victims decide what the punishment is.
No, I know. And so, like, again, I feel like, you know, what he was doing there was to try to, you know, put his moral conscience above, you know, whatever his personal feelings were maybe. And I feel like in this case, we can apply that however unpopular it may be. And I feel like it's appropriate because, you know, just randomly punching this guy in the face, again, not only feeds the narrative that the alt-right has built the left, most groups in society they don't like, but it also, applying the same standard from before, like we had just talked about, you know, it shows that we're letting someone who's not we're showing to somebody who's trying to get us riled up that we don't have the capacity to be the better person. I feel like to let him do that to us, when of course, you know, his ideas are dangerous. They're not different from Nazism. Even if Nazism was a term from the past, it is quite literally the same thing. You know, I think to suggest that it isn't is just foolishness, and it's an insult to my intelligence. It's your intelligence. It's anyone's intelligence. But to go and punch him in the face, however much we want to do that, is not going to solve any issues. I think to really delegitimize, you know, his ideology is to do what Martin Luther King is. You know, Martin Luther King and a lot of civil rights leaders have done is, you know, to use love to fight out hatred, to use light to push out darkness, or, you know, something to that effect. I feel like, you know, saying "Hail Trump" and then giving a Nazi salute is a pretty good indicator that you are indeed a Nazi. And if you need a safe space for that, like, why are you complaining about people who have legitimate reasons to need safe spaces? Why would you complain about people getting them if people who legitimately need them, such as rape victims or people with PTSD? Why would you complain about that when you're just afraid to admit that you are in fact an American member of the greater Nazi? I don't even know. It's not even a movement. It's like a party, and obviously, historically speaking, it was part of history. But quite frankly, oh man, I personally think to allow ourselves to let go of our own personal sense of decency and just to let loose on them, as appealing as it is, that's not going to get us anywhere. And I think, that's just my view. I think, I would not necessarily be bothered if someone punched me in the face. I'm not saying at all that we should condone that, but he's really pushing it. But
it was certainly amusing, but I think the whole thing with this alt-right movement and guys like Richard Spencer, as you pointed out, is they're trying to get a rise out of us.
Yeah,
they're
Milo Yiannopoulos, freaking Martin Shkreli, all these. It's just like, oh hey, let's try to tip people off because that's the easiest way to make someone look like a fool and a loose cannon. And I think
it's 4chan personified essentially because that's where Pepe is from. And by the way, if you're ever on 4chan, please use Pepe as much as you can because it pisses them off. It's so funny. But anyway, besides the point, they're trying to get a rise out of people. So, in this particular case, I'm going to give it a pass because it was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was kind of it was funny because it's so unexpected.
Yeah, but at the same time, don't do it. It's not a good idea.
Don't get used to that because then they can do it to us, and then they're like, "Whoa, we're just having a fun time." Whoa. But then, we've crossed that line. I think, before we go to any topic, I want to give it a good shout out to my friend Nacho Martin. I know you are a big fan of Pepe the Frog, the meme, and not the hate symbol, because Pepe the Frog is Pepe the Frog. He can be quite funny, but shout out to Nacho. But back to the story. You get it. I think it's just like my grandmother. She's always really instilled. My grandmother and my mother, and members of my family. They've really instilled that hey, it's not worth. It's never worth letting someone control you with your own anger or with your own, personal distortions that you may have at a certain moment. I think it's just not worth it. It's not gonna solve a greater, deeper issue of systematic white privilege or systematic, inequality that have led people to turn to these radical movements. I think to punch someone in the face is not the solution. So whoever listens to this, don't punch Nazis in the face, but maybe consider hitting them with your grandma's handbag. That's a better idea. I don't know if you've seen the picture now. That's a great picture of the grandma lady hitting a Nazi with her purse. That's the way to do it. That's
fantastic.
Today on How You Do It, How to Fight American Nazis. No, but I think it would be just counterintuitive. But what else do we got?
All right, real quick before we wrap up, you had a story that you wanted to share?
It's actually a story that you had put up on the Democrats in the Wilderness. It was from Political Magazine. I had been thinking about this, at least unconsciously, because of the fact that I had heard, I think it was on a video that a think tank put out. This is a pretty interesting time to be a Democrat because they're becoming increasingly in the minority. We have over 30. I'm pretty sure over 30 Republican. Maybe I'm incorrect about that, but I'm pretty sure there's over 30 Republican governors right now, and over at least over 20. Maybe I'm incorrect about that, but
I believe it's 16 Democratic governors.
16 Democratic governors, so that would mean how many 50 states. So that's a good. Let's not get into the technical numerics, but the point being is that Democrats, they really have to figure out a way to recover because their expectations are, oh, Hillary would win this election, but we would have some time to figure out what the heck this existential crisis is that we're having. And I think the big thing that they emphasized was that, like, now we don't, I'm a registered independent, and I think it's still a very interesting thing to consider, is that how, like, people like Elizabeth Warren and people like Senator Booker, how they're going to try and rally their troops, politically speaking, and to get people to really just fight this current administration and to get a Democrat or even just like a independent Democratic socialist in the White House. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but I think I only skimmed most of it. But I think that's a very interesting idea. I don't know exactly what your thoughts on that, but I think to get young people involved, I'm quoting a line directly from Bernie Sanders right now, but like to get young people involved is to like invest, put a great investment in American politics and in political movements, because young people, they have so much energy, and I'm saying that as someone who is a young person and not just some granddad, grandpa guy just sitting on his couch, I believe that we have a really concrete power and to change the course of history, and I think that's what they need to do. I think if they ever want to win another presidential election anytime soon, is to really just rally young people and get them involved and then encourage them. Hey, this is so important, or you're screwed. But yikes.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. So the piece in the topic, specifically the piece that you're talking about, yes, it's Democrats in the Wilderness, I believe, from Politico. Very long piece, talking about it more in depth next week with my friend and former member of A Path of Progress, Ryan Wiley. So especially since we don't have a lot of time left, we can touch on it pretty quickly here. Yeah, it makes a lot of great points, and it's, there are a few different strategies floating around about how to revive the party, because in the past, there are at least quite a few Democratic governors when the entire federal government was controlled by Republicans, or state legislatures, or whatever. And that's, as you pointed out, not really the case right now. It's very dire straits.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ironic because that's what a lot of Democrats were predicting would happen to Republicans this year. So, but anyway, yeah, I definitely think that galvanizing young people will help them a lot. But just my main thing is that they really need to return to the grassroots, and they need to be they need to be yeah, to quote our favorite governor, we really need to be going back to the local level and just trying to appeal to voters in a more genuine way. I followed Jason Kander a lot over the past few months, and he's still been active even after the election when he lost the U.S. Senate race in Missouri. And a great thing that he keeps bringing up is that he's saying, I didn't try to hide my true colors, especially running in a red state as a Democrat. I just was myself. I was genuine. I still lost, but Jason Kander only lost to an incumbent senator by about 4 points when Trump carried Missouri, but I think 20 points. So he was obviously doing something right.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very, very important to consider, because a big thing is people are saying, oh, identity politics ruined the Democratic Party. Not necessarily. We need to be appealing to everybody. We need, and as Jason Kander put it, he said, I said Black Lives Matter in Ferguson, Missouri, and I also said it in rural areas, because you have to be consistent, and you have to be consistent with the views that you hold. You can't just try to tailor your message and flip flop on the issues to whatever audience you are, just to try to get their votes, because that's why you don't win, because people view you as disingenuous.
Yeah,
And
no, exactly.
even if your intentions are good, even if you do get in government, you do a good job, if you lie about your positions, or you flip flop, then people are going to have less respect for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the reason why people like Bernie Sanders, um, you know, are so popular among young people, because of how genuine and how consistent, um, you know, his record is. I mean, to get a guy like Killer Mike, who, if you don't know already, folks, Killer Mike does not have faith in any priest or politician or, established form of government. The guy is pretty much, your typical, young person, who feels disenfranchised with the system. And he was able to get behind Bernie Sanders because of how trustworthy he was and how genuine he was. And I think that's something that we really need to hit on, is that not only do we have to be trustworthy and genuine, but we also have to make sure people know that we are, or that the Democrats are, or that, the left is, because, if we don't, LOL, bye-bye, we're going to have to really change the whole format of how the Democrats do things. I think it's really, all up in the air at this point, and we don't know what's going to happen. But, I think people have great power to change it, and, I think that's what people need to know, that they can change it, so that way we can start figuring out what we have to change and how we can change it for the better. But yeah, that's my thoughts. But oh god, woo!
All right, well, you're definitely welcome back to next show for a more in-depth discussion on that matter, and of course, welcome back anytime.
Thanks,
thank
man.
you very much. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, remember, have malice toward none.
Hey, skirt. Everybody